All right, welcome back, everyone. We're here in the Scholar and Gentleman with special guest David Jorgensen, all the way from Portland, Maine, now in Wilmington, North Carolina. We're here to discuss Book 8 of Brothers Karamazov, Mitya, the book where everything goes wrong. and boy, is it chaotic. So I just finished reading this about 10 minutes ago. And I have to say I'm a little more scatterbrained than usual. I didn't take very many good notes, and I only marked a few passages. So I can really use your help this week to, set the topics of conversation. I'm going to take a lot less leading role this week. So help me out. Hopefully some of you have some important insights or just funny stories or whatever. So let's just start from the beginning. We have Dmitri flying around in a panic, trying to figure out how he's going to come up with the money he needs in order to repay Katerina so that he can leave honorably with Grushenka and start his brand new life, which is, of course, going to be one of virtue, all virtue from now on. I was struck by how this whole entire dilemma is basically hinged upon his pride and honor. It even says so in the middle of 366. Of course, Grushenka had money, but on this point, Mitya suddenly turned out to be terribly proud. He wanted to take her away himself, to start the new life with her on his own money, not on hers. He could not even imagine himself taking money from her, and suffered at the thought to the point of painful revulsion. He probably could do this some other way, but then he'd be a scoundrel in his own eyes, and somehow he's not already. Or maybe he is, but this one point, he can't go that far, I guess.
Well, I think the whole point is that he is a scoundrel in his own eyes, but he wants a fresh start, and he can't start that fresh start by still being a scoundrel. Like, the whole point is he wants to get away to a new place so he can then live a virtuous life. And I was really struck by that, like, at the top of 366, about this renewed and now virtuous life and resurrection and renewal, and it's all hinging on a change of place. Like, that really spoke to me. I mean, it might be a little bit that's not always the way it works. You know, you get to a new place and you're still yourself, and you still have circumstances, and you still have baggage. But I think a lot of people at one point or another have hoped for like just a completely fresh slate like that.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. That passage caught my... I'm glad you mentioned that passage at the top of the page, because I think that's worth reading out loud. So it actually starts on the previous page where he's saying, what if she suddenly says, "Okay, I'm ready to go with you. Take me away. I'm yours forever." And he wants to take her away as far as possible. If not to the end of the world, then somewhere to the end of earth. Marry her there, settle down with her incognito, so that no one would know anything about them. Not here, not there, not anywhere. Then, totally at once. He dreamed of this renewed and now virtuous life. It must be virtuous. Ceaselessly and feverishly, he thirsted for this resurrection and renewal. The vile bog he had gotten stuck in of his own will burdened him too much, and like a great many men in such cases, he believed most of all in a change of place. If only it weren't for these people, if only it weren't for these circumstances, if only one could fly away from this cursed place, then everything would be reborn. That was what he believed in and what he longed for. I think most of us probably had some moment like that. Like, let me just cancel this whole thing out and start over. And I could just change the place and, then I'll be better.
And again, the contrast is drawn to the kind of advice that Father Zosima gives in the chapter Lady of Little Faith, or the chapters where he's giving advice, which is usually that there's no one thing that you can do to fix this. It's a long, slow grind of trying to be decent. And Dmitri, kind of takes a few shifts over the course of this chapter, but each time he kind of thinks like, if I just do this one thing right, everything will be fine. And it's almost viscerally painful to watch how wrong he is.
And Ginny, definitely point taken that it's awfully hard to ground a virtuous new life on, stealing your fiance's money to run away with, a mistress, and then become virtuous.
There was a passage that struck me. There's always a lot made of, these kids are spoiled, these guys, and I do research on, on narcissism. There was this passage, nevertheless, to the very end, he kept hoping he would get to 3,000, that the money would come to him, that it would somehow fly down to him by itself from the sky, no less. That's precisely how things will happen with people like Dmitri Fyodorovich, who all their lives know only how to spend and squander inherited money that they got without any effort, and have no idea how money is earned. Really appreciated that kind of, a lot of my students, but a view of the effect of wealth on narcissism and on this. The last chapter is called Delirium, but this whole book is delirium of the highest order of this narcissistic, somewhat spoiled person.
Yeah, and let's not forget to just kind of ring that point home that we're talking about something like a year's wages here or more.
I'm going to swindle other people out of it, and that will be honorable.
Did anyone have any comments about this sort of strange meeting between Dmitri and and Grushenka's patron, and just how bizarre that kind of confrontation is? The whole thing is just sort of tragicomic and painful to watch. Dmitri somehow convinces himself that this guy's now going to view Dmitri as, a natural successor and not a rival, and surely realizing that he's about to die will naturally want to hand Grushenka off to someone who can, look after her and a decent, honorable man. It's all very painful when he actually goes and speaks to him. And I kind of love the way that he spits out this scatterbrained proposal that's all over the place and just completely it's completely absurd. And then he gets to the end and says, if you don't understand, I'll drown myself today. That's it.
Well, I don't fully know what to make of it yet, but I did notice there's a parallel between the scene with Alyosha and Sneguryev, right? Like, I do feel like, even though it's so different, Alyosha's trying to be hugely generous, but it's this moment of the Karamazov, like, kind of spluttering and getting really over emotional and like just pouring out this idea. And then this other person who, until the last minute, like, I feel like that was an interesting parallel that says right there that until the last minute, Samsonov didn't know what he was going to do, but he decides at the last minute out of spite to send him to this other drunk lion guy just to mess with him. So again, I don't fully know what the point of that parallel is, but it seemed like a deliberate parallel of the Karamazov who gets like caught up in his own telling of the story and like says a bunch of stuff that immediately he's like, why did I say that? And then this other guy who's kind of like clearly never going to give him the money, but decides to do this extra spiteful, over the top reaction to prove something, and is so full of hate that he scares his own son. Like, that was part that kind of made me laugh. Like, his son's always scared of him, but the man was so pissed off. His son was really, really scared. So
I had a parallel with his Dmitri and his dad. In that earlier I had said that, or weeks ago, that his father seems manic, and he seems manic as well. Like, this is like some kind of inherited bipolar disorder sort of a thing. Like, you're in such a frenzy that you believe that this guy is being altruistic for you. I don't know.
I saw Ralphie in The Christmas Story. You should try out, kid.
All right, Taggy wins. I'm done.
Yeah, and then Samsonov kicks him down the slide.
Yes.
Boot in his face.
It was kind of that exact same thing where he's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be really slick and I'm going to tell him, and like, don't tell him directly, just let him kind of guess at it. And then I'm like, going to go and blurt it all out. And then like, and Ralphie gets that funny smile on his face, like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Santa gives him this funny look and kicks him down the slide. It's like totally straight out of Christmas Story, but the same sort of comic relief I found in the same sort of the narrator going back and forth with Dmitri, and like Dmitri kind of has this like wooden laugh that pops out. It's like, ah! It's really kind of comic.
So I suppose that leads us straight to the next really awkward encounter, where he chases after this woodcutter tradesman, Liagavi Gorstkin, and he's been set up with the nickname that he hates. This is the same character, by the way, that if you remember, Fyodor was trying to convince Ivan to go talk to. And he describes, how to read all his mannerisms, and if his beard shakes, he's telling the truth and all that kind of stuff. So somehow, Samsonov seems to have intel that this deal has already fallen through, and sends him straight to, a drunk guy that's going to hate his guts, armed with the password to really piss him off. It's a pretty pathetic scene. Like him, I can just imagine him like yanking around and jerking and slapping and smacking this drunk, passed out guy. He just won't respond. And then, like, how absolutely ridiculous is it that he has to stay up all night and like nurse a drunk guy? He's like dabbing his forehead with a cloth and stuff. What do you think is going to happen here? The guy wakes up in the morning and like, hey, I'm here in your cabin. I'm ready to make a deal with you. I held you last night.
Reminds me of college students.
Get the permanent marker. We're going to draw on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't quite get why he couldn't have just come back in the morning. I mean, I understand in his state he wouldn't, but... And then they almost died in the middle of the night because the window wasn't open or something. That was so weird.
I think like something was wrong with the chimney.
Carbon monoxide. Yeah. It's just so pathetic when he wakes up and the guy's already drunk again. And you're like, oh no.
It's like, I missed my opportunity. No.
And there were so many points where he could have just like realize like he could have just listened to the priest and like heard the priest be like, yeah, like I don't think this is a great idea. Like I don't think that you're being set up for success here. And then you walk in and there's a drunk guy, and you still think that you're gonna like find some way to achieve success with this, and you stick around, and like at what point he takes so long to just realize that he just needs to move on.
I love how the priest makes his escape as well.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just gonna take this other horse here. Like I'm out of here.
I enjoy the your lack of planning isn't my emergency, so I'm going to keep being drunk aspect of it.
If you guys don't have any other comments about that one, I'm excited to talk about the gold mines chapter, which is probably my favorite section.
Who just died laughing?
That's Maggie. This is definitely the humorous chapter of the section. But like, again, tragicomic, desperate, painful, dark humor. But such a perfect setup. Like, again, Dmitri somehow convinces himself that this is totally going to work. You know, I'll just ask for a loan, and I'll give you my rights to the village of Chermashnya, and you'll get that back. At least it's an honest effort.
I mean,
But,
you never know. The fire festival almost happened, right? Like sometimes you spin a bunch of lies and people do give you away tons of money. Also, I feel like it's worth noting, like it's Madame Koklikov. Like I'm not entirely unsure. Like she does seem like the kind of lady that if you came to her on the right day with the right story, she would give you a year's wages to like go build a charity or something, right? Like
Dimitri's an influencer. That's what he's
Instagram model. Hello.
So it's just hilarious to see these two, like they're the perfect characters. Like neither of them can listen at all. So they just keep interrupting each other before they've gotten to the point, so that they're each having their own totally separate conversation, and it is gloriously hilarious.
Before we completely jump into Madame Koklikov stuff, the very beginning of the chapter, can we talk about how the narrator spent like 2 or 3 pages trying to say how jealous men are better than not jealous men? Did that make anybody else really angry?
He did ask, and what good is love that must be constantly spied on?
Yeah, and like, I don't know, like at some points the narrator seems to be saying like, exactly, what good is this love, or it's not a good thing to spy, but then he goes right back and defends it again, and I was not liking the narrator at this point.
I guess it didn't strike me as him defending him. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying how like when I read it, it struck me as him like kind of exploring the psychological weirdness of jealousy, where like this man will decide for a minute that everything's fine and then freak out and go back. I don't know. It seemed like everyone came off looking like a jerk in this passage, but maybe that's me thinking everyone looked like a jerk.
I thought it was attempting to expose the contradictions of the heart, where the same heart can have lofty and noble intentions and also go hide in a closet, and not even feel ashamed for that. But not to completely dismiss the other side of Mitya's heart either. Like it doesn't mean that he has zero loftiness or nobility or whatever. I didn't really see it as a defense of that so much as a insight into how contradictory he is.
Okay, that's fair. Maybe I read it more as a defense of jealousy, but
Also, I've never read Othello, so
yeah, I think I've seen it once. I've never read it. But yeah, I mean, as like people are complex, I buy that totally. It just seemed, I don't know. It struck me differently. That's all. It doesn't mean I read it
I
right.
can see that.
Yeah, jealousy is funny.
And this might be a case where, you know, my personal life colored my reading of it.
Is somebody's cat purring?
Super loudly.
Okay, I was just like, am I losing my mind or is that really happening? Okay, just checking.
That's
Just checking. Delirium or cat? You never know.
Cats are jealous.
Move off the topic of jealousy, I just want to point out that if you remember, Alyosha and Lise had a very similar conversation to this back when they got betrothed, or quote unquote. And she was saying that she was going to spy on him and she was going to listen through the door and she was going to go through all his stuff. And he was like, "That's very bad, but I'll still love you."
And she insisted that mothers should be jealous, right? She's like, no, mothers must spy on their daughters. And he's like, really?
And it turns out that, in fact, her mother is spying right then.
True to form. Well, if we want to go into like the father's dispute of, it's like this is what Ivan and Dmitri are all about, is like lack of a good father or whatever. You could say like, well, this is what what's her name and Madame Koklakov's daughter are all about too, about jealousy and spying. But set aside.
So I love how this passage begins as he begins to reveal his plan. At first, things seem to smile on him. And she says she's been expecting him, and like, I just love that she keeps interrupting him, knowing his intentions. And when he starts naming 3,000, she's like, "Oh, of course, 3,000. Yeah, so no trouble."
Only then at the end to be like, "No, I don't have any money."
Oh, wait, what? You thought I was going to give you money? Where'd you get that idea?
Well, that's where it struck me. I don't think she knew his intentions. I think she was so in her own world that she that's part of what I think is the comedy of this scene, is she has decided she's done with mysticism because Father Zosimo's a fraud, right? She keeps bringing that up. Like, he smelled, so I'm done. So I'm going to be a realist now. So just today I decided you should go to the mines, and then you showed up. And so it must have been a realistic sign from the heavens that you were supposed to go to the mines. So I'm going to put this icon on you, but I'm done with mysticism. This is all realism. Like, I feel like she's just in some cycle of her own about how she came up with this plan and then he showed up, so it was magic. So like everything he's saying, that's where I feel like you're right, she's not even listening. He could say anything and she's like, yes, that's a sign, you're supposed to go to the mines. Like,
yeah. And then like, she keeps getting sidetracked, as she always does, but I love her sidetracks. Like, one of them is, "Oh, this is a side most people don't know of me, but I stay up all night losing sleep about the depreciation of the ruble." Yeah.
David, you asked why I was laughing. That was one of the lines when she was like, "I just can't sleep because I'm worrying about the depreciation of the ruble," that I died laughing. We must be married for a reason, McG. We find the same Madame Koklakov lines really funny.
I think she's my favorite character in the book, actually.
She just doesn't have a filter, I don't think. She just says whatever comes to her mind.
I think one of the things I'm noticing more in this reading of the book is how many like unexpected parallels there are. Like we've said, many characters are foils for others, but this is such a complicated web of relationship. And like I think this chapter really highlights how Dmitri and Madame Koklikov are the same in some ways, right? Like not just that they don't listen, but on page 383, right before they start talking, it's like Mitya went into ecstasies developing his new idea, but that is always what happened to him in all his undertakings, all his sudden decisions. He gave himself passionately to every new idea. And like that's a verbatim description of what's happened to Madame Koklikov, right? With this idea of the minds. So you have two people that are just like wrapped up in their own like passionate, insane delirium about what's going to fix life. And they're just like not able to. I don't know. I'd never thought of those two as the same, but they are, right? They're just like, this is it. This is the one thing that will fix everything. And for one, it's a loan, and for the other, it's gold mines. But they're both like kind of just talking past each other, like, no, man, if you saw it my way, you'd know.
Well, and that's exactly why they're talking past each other, is because they're both so amped up and so excited and so sure that their idea is the right idea and that that's what's going to work.
And I think
they can't even hear anything else.
All Dmitri had to say was, "I need $3,000 so I can go start a mine." And he would have had it, I think.
So you're saying you could have swindled Madame Koklikov?
Problems.
You know how to like work that angle.
Well, it's just so funny. It's like the comicness is like neither one of them can listen to each other. So it's like Dmitri can't even hear what she's saying. So he's not even possible like to swindle her because he's so like amped up in his idea. Like, it's really simple for him to like borrow money or swindle it out. But like Madame Koklikov would be easy to swindle, I think. But Dmitri just like completely drops the ball on this one.
And that's where it feels also like an interesting contrast that sometimes we see how much Dmitri is like his father, but his father can swindle people. And I feel like Dmitri can't, right? Like he is just single-mindedly trying to get this money and he can't even run a con to save his life. He's just like assuming someone will give him this money because he so desperately needs it. And then I also noticed there's that weird parallel to Alyosha, where like we've heard how Alyosha, if he had no money, would just be able to get by and go and ask. Like again, I'm just seeing how like there's so many facets that these characters share things, and in one person it can look like a virtue, and in another it can suddenly become a crippling vice.
That's a nice point right there. Although I don't think Alyosha ever needed to ask for $3,000 to run away with the girl and throw a big party, you know.
Not yet. Maybe in the second book that Dostoevsky was going to write.
But that's a really excellent. I love that parallel. One of my other favorite parts. This is when Dmitri finally like, gets a word and it's like, but see, you got to understand what I'm actually talking about here is a woman, you know, like, and Madame Koklikov is, oh. Part with everything, women especially. You know? You don't need women there. Like, go get rich. When you come back, they'll have settled the women's question. I myself am no stranger to the women's question. Like, and then she gives this little lecture about the modern woman that I just absolutely love. Like,
well, and I love that because there was.
I wrote to this author, and
she uses the same language that she just did about like people don't know this about me, but I worry about the ruble. And then she's like, people don't know this about me, but I'm really worried about the women's question. Like,
and then she like sits there and tries to explain how she signed the letter, a mother, and like I was gonna say a contemporary mother. But I thought that might be like overdoing it, you know. That would have reminded him of the contemporary, like a magazine that is opposite to his views. And so it's just, I love how she gets just sidetracked in these crazy little explanations that it's, you can just imagine Dmitri like sort of sitting there shaking, you know, like with impatience and just like kind of dumbfounded about like, he can't get through.
He's been blocked out on every level.
This is great too, as it continues, like he kind of falls to the floor, clasping his hands in supplication. He's like, "Madame, you will make me weep if you keep putting off what you're so generous." And she's like, "Weep, Dmitri, weep. It will do you good. Such feelings are beautiful.
You can't even break through on my breakthrough.
This is like some kind of gatekeeper and keymaster type stuff. When
Madame Kokolkov is a wall. She's just a wall. You can't break through her. Dmitri's met his match, and it's terrible to him. and extremely hilarious at the same time.
I also pointed. I think I mentioned this to David earlier today. I think when Dmitri gets angry, he spits and walks out of the room and sort of rushes out. This is the first woman he makes scream. I was like, I'd like to get the total count of the IE count for this book. There's like 7 of them.
Yep, there's one on the next page.
And he really just rolls through them. I scanned this scene, I think, a little bit differently than you guys. 'Cause I didn't find them to be. It wasn't that they were so similar, or not. It wasn't that they were like doing the same thing to each other, like talking past each other. I thought it was that Dmitri, maybe unlike his father, doesn't know how to like beg for stuff. He doesn't know how to be supplicative. He doesn't know how to be low status. And when he keeps trying, he gets confused and like doesn't finish his questions. And so he is, it's sort of similar to what Aaron was talking about earlier about the sort of narcissism of the children of the wealthy. Dmitri just doesn't know how to ask for help. At least not in a normal way. It's sort of that all or nothing. It's either I am wretched and weeping, or I am proud. He can't just say like, can you hit me with 3,000? Really need it. Like a normal, desperate person. Just different gloss on that scene.
Anyone else want to comment on that chapter?
Well, I think I also feel like as funny as Madame Kokolkov is, and I think she's supposed to be funny, but I think there are parallels to some of the more serious characters too, right? Like, even though it's hilarious, her sort of rush from religious faith to like, now I'm going to be a realist and embrace all these ideas seems to sort of be mocking the kind of interchange that's happened between Alyosha and Ivan, right? Like, it's a sort of parodic version of it, but it's like, if your faith like I've said that Smerdyakov question where he's like, if your faith gets challenged, why wouldn't you? Like, she just kind of in real time did that. Like, okay, well, I'm done with religion now, like on to realism, but she fails at it. But I just felt like it was again sort of rehearsing these questions of what happens when you take a massive blow to your faith. And Madame Kokolkov's, I just said her name really weird, but whatever. In her case, it's just hilarious, but I feel like it's that same sort of move we've seen. Like, it's kind of a different version of Alyosha being like, now I shall drink vodka and go to a fallen woman's house, right? She's like, well, now I will send you all to the gold mines where we will earn money, because that is realism, right? Like, no more praying, it's time for gold.
This is the age of railways.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I love that line so much, but that's my own dorky thing. But
wasn't it like what Dmitri does too? I mean, doesn't he just like switch ideas like one right after the other and like kind of run down his list of ideas? Like, well, first I'm going to make money off of this deal here, and then I'm going to go to Madame Kokolkov and she'll give me some money. Or if that fails, then I don't know what I'm going to do.
Well, it's actually striking that he's trying to do the reverse of like, he's actually trying to make the leap of faith or whatever and move to the good life. So he's actually headed the opposite direction of the characters that Melissa mentioned, but he's stuck and he can't get out of his old bad patterns, or he just can't figure out any way to free himself from all the knots he's tied himself in.
Yeah, I think the thing that we see that these characters are having in common is, in one way or another, they're very big fans of ideation, but they're not good at any of it in practice. I remember, listening to a TED talk about how so many people can be so great at, writing up their own exercise or diet plan, but they would just be far better served using that 15 minutes walking around the block. Because they're not going to actually follow through, but it's still a living in the imagination. And I think it's interesting that when you contrast it with the more sophisticated ends, like the Alyosha Ivan conversation, they're always trying to come back to the real, right? Regardless if they're coming from a atheistic perspective or from a spiritual perspective, they're always trying to get down to how it confronts them in their actions in the here and now. But with Koklakov and Dmitri, whether they're going to be secularists or religious, it's all about trying to kind of have whatever idea they have that can give them comfort in the moment. And it's interesting how I think Dostoevsky is doing something brilliant, how he's showing that people often say that religion is an escape from reality, but secularism and greed and dreams of success can also be an escape from reality. And I think no matter what, the constant theme of Dostoevsky is always going to be trying to show that the mature people, the people who know what's going on, are always going to be trying to stay on the level of the real. And that's the thing, right? Like, neither Dmitri nor Koklakov, I mean, they are completely, Plan 9 from outer space right now, because they are just so desperate for newness and comfort, and they don't seem to understand that, like, the real change that they want is just gonna need to require going through the shame and the pain and the accountability. Like, isn't it so interesting when Dmitri says, wherever we go, no one can know me, right? I have to be completely free from my shame. I have to be completely free from my guilt. And that's just it's not realistic, not only because word travels, but also because Dostoevsky is always going to say that you bear it in your body, right? Like, even Ivan, when he was on the train, right? Like, and called himself a scoundrel because he carried it with him. It was in his bones. And I feel like what's so brilliant about what's going on is Dostoevsky, he shows us a wise spirituality and a wise, sophisticated secularism. And now he's showing us a foolish spirituality and a foolish secularism.
I think that's really interesting and kind of feeds into our discussions, this whole way through in other weeks about how Dostoevsky doesn't necessarily answer the whole question of religion like definitively one way or the other, and shows both sides of it. I think it's really fascinating that not only does he show arguments like of both sides of it, but also, like you say, people dealing with this in a smart way or in a good way, and then in a foolish way. It's just another aspect of both sides that made more sense in my head.
I really appreciate what you guys are saying, and thank you, Ginny, for that too. Because I personally, I've been a little bit weary or something. I haven't, like, when I read through this section, I kind of got the plot, and I wasn't thinking about the connections and the bigger ideas. So I'm really grateful for you guys to kind of make some of those connections clear and, shed light on things going on beyond just what happened. It was a relief to me that's because I was kind of thinking this section is mostly just action, but it's really cool to see what connections we can still make.
Well, when you were saying that you thought Dmitri and Koklakov were the same, the thing I kept coming back to is I feel like Dostoevsky is trying to say that we're all the same, because I think underneath it all, everybody just wants to be happy and secure. And I think that's why these ideas are so foolish, these escapes, and the willingness to do just these completely. I mean, like I have a good friend who's having to convince a friend of theirs that, you know, this Russian girl they've been talking to for 3 months, you know, online doesn't actually exist, and yet he's willing to set up these bank accounts for her that have just these massive amounts of money, and just the level of irony since we're reading this book is just dripping. And I'm listening to this and I'm just thinking to myself, you know, for that promise, right? And and then it hit me in that it's like, in the same way that people are willing to do these foolish things for that dream of that intimate bliss and happiness, people are willing to make those same religious pilgrims and go thousands of miles to Mount Athos or wherever just to find the one person where, if I can only get to this one person, this one spiritual event, this one revelation, this whatever, then everything will be all right if I can just find the panacea key. And they're all just searching for the panacea key. And I think that it's just amazing how, like, in Zosima, he's always about the same thing. He's like, no, there's no key. You just have to love your neighbor in front of you starting now. And it's, you know, but just nobody wants to do that. Like, nobody wants to do. And I just feel like the priest is there earlier precisely to indicate that again. Like, just do the little thing. Just do the next right thing. No, I have to do the big, grandiose, out of this world, risky, daring thing, because that's where the dream is.
Panacea Key.
Yeah.
The album name of this evening.
Also, Micah, I think you could do some great like movie preview voiceovers right now.
Can you say "I'm Batman" for us, please?
I'm Batman, but the thing you said about the movie voice, my first thing I was thinking was, in a world where a nerd finally sounds masculine.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you humoring the group with that.
I like that counterpoint with how you said "I'm Batman," like you're like trying to get your order at Starbucks.
I'm Batman, but don't write that on the cup.
Sorry, I just couldn't help feel slightly hesitant since I was performing like a prancing monkey for your amusement.
We are amused, sir.
That's a couple chapters away.
Okay, so Dmitri gets frustrated, runs out in the street, just about knocks an old lady over, and finds out that Grushenka.
Hi.
Thank you. Count number 2. Grushenka has left the building.
Oh, I think that's amazing, actually. That little note where he almost runs over the lady in our retrospective conversation about the little things right in front of us. Here he is, like, missing that there is actually a person in front of him that he's running over that happens to be old and screams out at him. But it's just like the irony of that. It's funny.
Then he goes and terrifies Benya, the kind of Grushenka's maid or whatever, and grabs the pestle for who knows what reason and runs out. So then we have chapter 4 in the dark. Now he's creeping around in his dad's yard. Having climbed the fence, and it's interesting that it makes some note of this, at apparently the same spot where stinking Lizaveta got over. And what I like about this chapter is the, I think, very detailed psychological insights and little tiny, details that it notices that he mentions. So, it's like there's one moment where he says something about, his heart's racing and all this stuff, but then he notices like, wow, this type of flower is really red or something weird like that, and you get into his head as he sees his dad stick his head out the window, and it kind of talks about again, how just he hates his profile, and that Adam's apple and his stupid hooked nose like just drive him insane. And it's kind of I thought there were a lot of things like that where this is kind of like a good psychological insight into the type of criminal mind or whatever who would be sneaking around, you know, in this great state of agitation.
Why do you think he jumped over the fence at the same place as stinking Lizaveta? That's my question.
I have no idea if that's important whatsoever, but I guess that's where, like, he's just realizes he can get in. Like, if she could get in, I could get in.
Yeah, well, I don't have a quote ready for this, but I feel like I remember back when we met Stinkin' Lizaveta, they said everyone was shocked that someone could climb that fence, right? That it was not supposed to be easy to do, let alone pregnant. So it's like, yeah, if she can do it, then a crazed madman should be able to do it in his rage.
Maybe I'm trying to find something special, but I'm not.
Well, what are you thinking, Taggy? I feel like
don't know.
I just felt like the way you said that was so ominous. I wanted to know what was behind it.
I want to know what's behind there because I don't think if I was going to write something as an author, I'd be like, this is supposed to be a pretty sweet slam dunk connection here. And like, I didn't see one.
But that's partly why I feel like so much of this is psychologically brilliant is Dostoevsky has I can't say it. Dostoevsky has us all like looking for all of these connections already before we even know what's happened. And I feel like half of them are red herrings. Like, that's what I think is partly going on.
I hate red herrings. Like pickled herrings, I eat those. But...
No. You too.
High five, Taggy. She actually likes pickled herring. She denies it. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
You mix it in with a little bit of like sour cream or something. It's delicious.
You Orthodox boys.
I like it, but I don't approve of the joke.
Yeah, it wasn't a joke. It was just, it's delicious.
But Taggy's was
I've never had a pickled red herring though.
Yeah. If it's red, it's bad. I mean, that's really what it is.
Okay, but my point is, I feel like there's so much in these chapters that is being deliberately misleading and designed to make you go, wait, what is that? I mean, what is that? And we all fall for it.
But like, I want to like put a connection between like stinking Lizaveta, who like gives birth in the garden, and like Dmitri, who like kills his dad in the garden or something like that, but enters the same way. And
I think you're trying too hard for symbolism. I don't think there's really that much symbolism in Dostoevsky most of the time. Like parallels, yeah, but
I just mean, I think he's being like at the very end of chapter 3, when he zooms in on the scene with Dmitri grabbing the pestle and having Fenya dramatically, oh Lord, she clasps her hands, he'll kill somebody, right? Like some of these things are being so set up to ask you to look for those connections. And I feel like it's the same thing with, oh, and Dmitri found the place with stinking Lizaveta. It's Lost season 5 all over again. Like, are there going to be a bunch of connections? You thought there were, but lies. Maybe.
Yeah, the narrator's being particularly like
overbearing
cagey in this whole book.
Cagey.
Yeah,
I was about to say cagey.
And particularly like, well, I'm going to tell you this little bit of it, and you'll see why that's important. Like literally, like those aren't quite the exact words, but those are almost the exact words. It's like, well, I'm just going to tell you this little bit, and then you'll see what happened.
Great eyebrow like implications there, Jenny. That was magic.
Thanks. I didn't even realize I was doing it.
I can imagine if this were a play or a movie, that this could be a really funny scene when Dimitri's hiding in the bushes and he's rapped on the window, and Fyodor's like Grushenka, my sweet, is that you? But where are you? You know, like like sticking his head out the window further and further and looking around and saying these ridiculous, like sickly phrases.
I mean, I thought the psychological brilliance too was when Dmitri is peering in the window and is almost certain that Grushenka's not there because the way his father is acting, but he can't help it, right? He has to knock on the window and use the sign. Like, that's where I felt like some of that jealousy conversation was coming to fruition, where it's, like, I feel to any of us that are outside, it's pretty clear that, like, why would Fyodor, if Grushenka was there, be sitting sadly at his table drinking cognac and, like, primping his face? But Dmitri just has to draw him out, and that just seemed so brilliant, where he's like, no, she's not there, but I mean, maybe, so okay, like, it just, he's just so fixated on having a concrete answer to this problem. And I felt like the partly where the narrator was being so cagey was early on, where he's really emphasizing that Dmitri thinks there's only two answers now, like Grushenka loves him or Grushenka loves his father. He just can't imagine that Grushenka is going to do something else. So he's like devised this whole series of tests. Like, if I knock on the window and my dad sticks his head out and asks for her, oh, good, then she loves me. Like, it's the most crazy she loves me not you've ever seen that he's going through. The end.
And as profound as a lot of these tools are, I also think it's good to just point out that a lot of this, like, but I'll tell you later, just seems like brilliant marketing for writing a serial in a newspaper. like you just can't help but chomp at the bit.
Lost season 5.
Can anyone read her lips?
We're having background disputes about Lost.
No, we're having a marital spat.
All is lost. Okay, so let's move to the past the ... what happened. So Gregory wakes up and is like, hey, why is the gate open or whatever, and starts chasing after him. And here's another really interesting psychological moment. It's like, kind of without even thinking about it, Dmitri just whacks him on the head. But then he jumps down and, like, you know, sort of frets over him for a minute. Says some weird, what's the weird phrase he says there? Something about, you came a cropper, old man, now lie there. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. But, like, he's sitting there, like, patting his head, the blood off his head with a handkerchief. And he's like, why am I doing this, you know? Like, why does he jump back down? Why does he tend to him like that? And then he sort of runs away, leaving it. He has no idea how it's going to come out, whether he's killed Grigory or not, you know? I don't know what there is to say about that necessarily, but it does seem believable in his character that, you know, he'd whack someone 1 minute and then jump down the next minute, kind of try to, I'll make it better. Are you hurt? And then run away.
Well, I think it's pretty natural to be like, okay, well, I didn't mean to kill a guy. I just meant to, like, get him to let go of me, you know, just daze him a little bit. And now I'm worried I might have killed him. But then sort of realize that he can't call for help and he can't, you know, really do anything without getting himself in trouble for being in the garden in the first place. So he just leaves, but I feel like he's kind of stuck, like, I didn't mean to kill a guy, I just was trying to escape. I think that's completely believable.
Yeah, I find that's a very, like, this whole the little psychological insight of a guy, he's jumping back down, not sure what he's done, not really having meant to, but then maybe don't swing it like a big brass pestle.
I was really struck by the very beginning of that passage when it says, God was watching over me then, Mitya used to say afterwards. Like that, this whole passage is like him running away from murdering his dad and then kills Grigory on top of it. Like, bashes Grigory over the head. Like, how is that God watching over you?
Yeah, right.
I mean, I think I kind of assumed that if he thought God was watching over him, that maybe Grigory doesn't actually die, but I don't think that's answered yet within this book, whether or not it seems like he is, but it's not answered for sure one way or the other. And
Yeah.
definitely it's the God was watching over, I think, keeping him from killing his father.
I was just curious if anyone was just haunted, and maybe it's because I've read it before, but I don't know, just the idea of Grigory screaming into the night, parricide, parricide. Like, I don't know, like, I always felt like this whole thing with the idea of God watching over him, and yet there's this scream in the night, parricide, parricide. I think to myself, how far can a person be in their delusion to, like, be thinking God's watching over me? And yet someone is screaming parricide into the night. And I always just thought that was so strange, because, like, one would think that something extreme like that could strike someone back into the moment, right? Like, if we were in AA, this would be a very good time for a moment of clarity. But yet, and yet, I don't know. I can't, when I read this, I just can't think of Dmitri and Grushenka and the way he thinks about destiny as far as him and Grushenka. I just can't think of him as anything else but an addict to have this narrow of a, and I know that might just, be reducing it or taking something complex, making it too simple, but to have such tunnel vision in the face of so many serious things going on. I mean, that to me just screams like, I just kept thinking of, an addict in the gutter who just does all these terrible things. He doesn't want to do terrible things, but he just has to get the fix. He just has to get it. I just couldn't help but making that connection in my mind.
Yeah, if you need like a rock bottom moment for AA, like someone screaming parricide at you in the middle of the night is probably a sign that your life is unmanageable. What were you gonna say, Michael?
I just like wonder why is Grigory like yelling at him parricide? It's because he like threatened to kill his father the next time he was there. But I mean, like, according to like the book so far, it just looked like he didn't like kill his dad. His dad was just alive just a couple of seconds ago or something like that. Like, why is Grigory yelling that? Like, it's just so expected that it's going to be Dmitri, or why? I don't know.
Let's restrict such questions to first-time readers. Just putting that out there right now.
I read that as I don't know if he was making an assumption or if this was the classic like mystery thriller where like it cuts away and you don't see what happens and then it's gonna reveal itself across time.
Right.
Anything could have happened and I didn't see any of it.
And then somehow he comes up with $3,000, which we all know is like in that like Grushenka envelope, but like I don't know. But it doesn't mention it like so far, so I don't know. I was kind of like, why is he yelling parasite as he's running across there? Like,
He's looking OJ guilty to me, but
yeah, that's well put there. And you definitely, I mean, he's undoubtedly.
But OJ was innocent. Come on now.
I mean, everyone's obviously, as Micah said, like, great job on, you know, when you're writing a serial novel, everyone wants to read the next section, you know, for sure. Are you guys ready to move on to chapter 5? Sudden decision.
Yeah.
Here's another IE, by the way.
It's a double IE.
So let's see. Has he gone back to Fenya? He's gone back to Grushenka's place, and now he's like choking Fenya. Yeah. And immediately, like, as soon as she says Grushenka's gone off with her former officer, and just like a complete change comes over him. He understands everything at once. Is like, oh crap, this whole thing I've been caught up in with my father is like completely missing the point, and I've been totally blind. And I mean, that's kind of a shocking moment there. And to see him get it so quickly, I thought that is a just this crazy huge transformation comes over him. I mean, that's a real bad moment. real bad moment for the guy competing for the girl. I think it's sort of amazing how, like, calmly he takes that. He seems
As
to.
he devises his next strategy.
Yeah, but his strategy is complete acceptance of this fact. If it's the first love, then that's just meant to be. I can't get in the way of that. That's sort of like beyond my reach. So the plan now is go have a big party and then shoot myself in the morning and get out of the way and rid the world of this worthless insect or whatever he says, calls himself. I might be jumping ahead chapters here. I'm sorry.
Well, it's hard for me to tell, like, if he was planning this whole entire party, like, let's just throw this giant party because I'm about to shoot myself, or, like, throw this party so I can, like, have a chance to, like, have a chance before I shoot myself.
I don't read it that way at all. I think he has self-declared that he has no chance. He's told multiple people his intention to, do you know how to make way for someone? He asked the coachman. I think it's just, I want to see her one more time and then shoot myself in the morning is pretty much the plan.
But why the party?
He's not trying to win her over at that point. I guarantee you that.
What would you want to do if you had one night left on Earth? Party.
This is something I can say now, is I think this scene is partly why I always understood Yvonne talking about dashing the cup as being about just killing himself eventually. Is this seems like a parallel where this character is like, oh, okay, I've hit a point. I can't get what I want. I can't make sense of any of it. So I'll go on a blaze of glory. I don't know. That to me was always a parallel where this is him like dashing the cup, right? Like I've tried every avenue. There's nothing left to me. So I'll just take myself out of the equation in some glorious romantic gesture. For him, it's all about women and love. And for Yvonne, it would be about humanity and love. But it's still the same sort of like, if I can't make sense of my great love that I have in this world, like, why not just leave?
I don't know. I want to say he's a little bit more conflicted. Like I think he's got this like kind of seeded hope for, like, well, maybe if I throw her like the party like I did last time, it'll work. But if not, it'll be like, well, at least I tried and I got my blaze of glory. I don't know.
Do you have any textual evidence to support that opinion, Michael? Because I can give you 3 examples of the contrary.
Well, go ahead.
He he states multiple times to Percotin, whom he has pawned his guns off to, that he's going to shoot himself in the morning. He says the same thing to the coachman. He explains, do you know how to get out of the way? He says, I need to remove this insect. He says the same thing when he shows up at the place and actually speaks to the Poles and says, don't worry, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm staying for the night. I'm going to get out of the way. So it's only when, and then he has this sudden moment of realization when he sees how Grushenka is acting towards them in the middle of this, that he has a different idea suddenly come to him. So I don't think there's very much support for your position there. I think that's a later development.
It's just kind of interesting though that he picked like the same idea to like I'm gonna go off the same way I met her. Like that's kind of.
Well, yeah, I think that's because it's the one moment that he cherished with her or whatever, where he kind of is like the one good time. Let's repeat that, and then I'll get out of here.
She loved him for 1 hour. Let's do that hour again.
1 whole hour.
Right.
I mean, yeah, he made several references to that's all he needs as well, right? He would trade everything for that finite time period with her.
And I think it just gets back to the idea of an addict. Like, it's just a fix. I mean, I feel like he thinks if he can just have the fix. And I know that might be a reduction, but I mean, that does seem to be like the way it is. And I'm not saying that, like, it's as simple as that, but isn't it interesting that so many times, like, a lot of the greater, like, spiritual crises, like, for example, if you look at, like, Gollum and Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, there's so much deep symbolism in that, but at the same time, Tolkien was also basing him off of opium addicts.
Yeah, I can see addict. I was going, as I was reading, thinking, what a manic sensualist who can't stop himself, who can't stop and put, 3 coherent, cogent sentences together in his frontal cortex of his brain and stop any of this. I think the outcome's the same, but
I guess once again, it's hard because I don't like, as we've said in multiple times on the record, how much do we want to say? But I don't think Dmitri is that far different than many people, right? Like, addictive love is the normative narrative in Western modern America, at least for sure. And I feel like the fact that we were introduced to him quoting all of these 19th century poets is suggesting that some of that addictive element of a romance had already infiltrated culture then. And this is what a lecture I once tried to give a class was like, this goes back to courtly love. Like, it's not that insane that this idea of addictive love is a cultural force rather than just being an individual psychopathology. I feel like we see some of that acted out in Dmitri in particular. Like, maybe he has his own problems, but it's like his idea of love is not that far off base from all these writers he's quoting, all these poets he's quoting. So I guess I'm just saying, I don't think Dmitri is like a huge deviant from the way that many people think about love. And sure, most of us aren't going to spend a year's wages on a party and then kill ourselves but right, like, how many of us do insanely self-destructive things in pursuit of love? And I feel like this is just another instance where we have a character that's taking that to the extreme. I don't know. I feel really vulnerable now having got on this limb, but I just feel like I don't want to just be like, Dmitri is so crazy. It's like, he's trying to live into this ideal, and there's literally no way he can get the money or the ability to do that. He's become a scoundrel. So, like, what do you do in that case? Like, yeah. Okay, I'm going to shut up now.
I find that...
That's a really interesting point. Sorry, go ahead, Michael.
I was thinking, and like throughout that commentary, like Dmitri without a plan, and this plan to, like, he's a man without a plan, and like if we've seen Dmitri, he's always been the man without a plan, and like this for me, this like rings as like a really, 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 really desperately low situation for Dmitri. Like, it's just like agony almost. Like, is the way I feel for him right now. As I see, like, he's willing to throw everything out and like this. Like, he's so lost. Like, he's so absorbed into this, and it's just like it's like heartbreaking almost. Like, to see like Dmitri in this state. It's like he's got this plan without hope, but until this point, he's always had a plan for hope, and it's like that shift, which is why my whole question is like, well, did he always have this hope or not? But if he's really lost that hope, like his whole outlook has shifted completely.
What were you going to say, Jenny?
Well, now I'm thinking about what Michael just said, so I'm kind of revising. But I was going to bring up off of what Melissa said, that this idea of idealized love. I mean, you only really have to look at the fact that Romeo and Juliet is considered one of the most romantic stories ever by lots of people. By myself until maybe college age, when I completely revised my opinion of it. And yeah, exactly. Look what a tragic end that met. And now I'm thinking about what Taggy just said, and I mean, I guess I agree that loss of hope does represent a shift, but I also don't think it's out of line for this like idealized love that Melissa was talking about, especially like bringing in Romeo and Juliet and other things, that this idealized love can end in tragedy. I don't know, it's a shift, but it's also just a different story. Like, oh, it looks like my life's not going to be Midsummer's Dream after all. It must be Romeo and Juliet. Time to kill myself. Like, it's a shift, but not necessarily a giant shift, I guess.
Is that the point? No, I mean, is that the point, really?
I think it is. And I mean, I'm saying, I think this is one thing that might not translate well for us as American 21st century readers, is like we were getting all of these footnotes about how one weird thing Fyodor and Dmitri share is they're obsessed with these German romances, right? And they like, I kind of feel like it might feel like quoting Romeo and Juliet all the time, these Schiller quotes they're always pulling out from these like melodramatic, over-the-top German romances. That maybe we have these two characters that are now fighting over this woman that both feel like that's how life is supposed to be, is some huge romantic, big R romantic, right? Like tragic play that has a beautiful end. And we see that crumbling for both of them because real love, and this I think is speaking to some of the points Micah was bringing up here, like real love is actually much, much freaking harder than that. But instead, we tend to think of it's either like, I'm going to get the girl or I may as well jump off a cliff. And like the fact that it might be harder is something that has not entered into either of these characters' worlds. So that's where I feel like I'm actually saying something that's kind of in between, is I'm saying I do think there is a change that takes place in Dmitri, that he's having to realize this is a fantasy. But I'm just saying I don't totally dismiss him because of that, as I feel like that's a fantasy that many of us have grown up living in and at a certain point have to face, is that it's parallel to Ivan loves all of humanity in a very big R romantic way, right? In this sort of like, I will save the masses. And he realizes he can't even handle taking care of a neighbor. And Dmitri now is like, I love Grushenka in this huge way, but like, he's having to realize that's a fantasy. I feel like we have different versions of the story about love. Like in some ways, this seems to me a novel about love. And Zosima has real love, and many of these characters have a sort of humanistic love that's romanticized, or in this case, it's literally a romantic love that's romanticized, and they have to learn that it's something else. But that's partly what Ivan and I think Dmitri shares. If your romantic vision falls apart, the desire to kill yourself is coming out of this sort of despair. Like, what else is there? If Grushenka will never choose you, if humanity is always going to keep killing children, like what else is there to choose? It's the day-to-day love that Zosima offers, but that can be really hard in that first moment when you realize what you thought love was is not actually what it looks like on the ground.
I would like to just point out, in the context of this conversation, with everything everyone said about Romeo and Juliet and the suicide he's now considering, that the entire novel opened up, if you remember, with a narrator passage about how, you know, some certain girl had thrown herself off a particularly picturesque cliff because of
to try to be like Ophelia.
Yeah, and because of a failed romance, which it was like, but kind of you didn't really try all the way you kind of wanted to be. I remember that there was sort of this weird, sort of ominous note that kind of jars you when you're just first starting this novel. And I think, you know, in light of what we're discussing now, it becomes a little bit more relevant or maybe that wasn't an accidental throwaway passage, you know?
No, I think that Dostoevsky is trying to say that fantasy thinking is part of the human condition. I think that, and I don't think people understand that, because I think Ivan's point about how people can't really love one another, I always thought that the central point of him saying that was he didn't believe people could actually love each other as concrete, real things, the way Zosima does. I think he thought that everybody was making the same mistake, that they didn't really love people, they loved objects in their minds. And I think that's why Ivan doesn't believe in love, is because he thinks that people are just too caught up in their own fantasy.
Is Dmitri the same way? I mean, that's what I kind of see here, is like Dmitri has now created this fantasy around Grushenka, which is basically the same thing as Ivan's problem of creating this like little ideological type of thing that he can love. But I don't think Dmitri's really loving Grushenka for who she is either. Like, it's not like Dmitri loves Grushenka because she is X and X. It's just like, well, she loved me for an hour. Like, but can anyone actually love someone for an hour? Like,
Not
besides,
a whole
like,
hour. Not a whole hour.
yeah, you know, it's like, this is not like a real sort of love that's portrayed by, you know, something that like Zosima would say. Like, this is a different definition of love altogether. It's this idealized sort of love. Like, you can't turn love on or off, and that's the central thrust of Zosima. It's like either you love humanity or you don't, and you can't turn love on or off. And this whole idea of loving for an hour stands in stark contrast to that central idea. And it's a different sort of love. And then like Ivan is like completely different. It's like, well, I can't love anyone at all, like ever, because everyone hates each other. So
I agree and disagree. I think it is a contrast, but I do think sometimes you like the fact that Grushenka was able to love someone genuinely for a whole hour. That's a big deal. Like, if you can't even love your neighbor for a minute, being able to truly love someone for an hour, like that might be all that might be your onion, right?
yes.
Yeah, and I was thinking of.
But can you really turn it on or off? That's my central point.
Well, I was thinking of the moment between Grushenka and Alyosha, which was a very brief moment of love between the two of them. It wasn't romantic love in that case, but it was a very sincere, strong, brief connection. And they really, truly, genuinely loved each other for that short period of time.
But did it turn off is the whole point. Like, did Alyosha love her for that moment and then like stop? Like, Alyosha continues on, right?
Well, that's where I don't think I fully get your point, Taggy. Are you saying like Grushenka, like it's not fair to love someone for an hour because real love continues forever? Or like, I just don't quite get your point, because I feel like part of what we are seeing is no human can love anyone forever. Like, we can only just learn to practice it in pieces, fragmentarily, until we get better at it.
Well, I think it's the difference between like the impact of love and actually love. And so like the impact of love was for a moment with Alyosha and Grushenka, and that impact of love, which was perpetuated in Alyosha, you know, from Zosima and such, continues on. Whereas like this idea of like, I'm going to love you for an hour and then it's like done, like it's kind of like a false love of sorts. But I think like Grushenka's had an awakening since that point as well, like where she kind of understands love as well. And so she's kind of circling back in some sort of respects in the rest of this chapter is what I see. But
I think these are good questions to carry into the next coming chapters, as particularly as we start to deal with Grushenka coming to terms with the return of her, her officer, what's it called? The former and indisputable one, or whatever it is. Before we rush ahead to that, I want to just stay on this chapter for a minute. And I'm rewinding way far back to a comment Aaron made about Dmitri's language and how kind of chaotic, rapid-fire, word salad, bizarre his language gets in this chapter. I'm actually very much reminded of the chapter where Dmitri and Alyosha meet. I forgot what that's called, but where they meet in the gazebo or whatever in the hidden garden, and Dmitri is in this sort of frenzy where he's rapturous, quoting poetry left and right, but also like tormented in his heart. And I'm seeing so many parallels in this chapter. Like he kind of goes back to that phase. He enters this frenzied state of mind, like he can't finish his thoughts. He's crushed and near despair, but he's also, quoting his glory to the highest in me verse again. And he says that he's drunk in spirit, and it's like he's flying back and forth between this utter despair and some sort of weird freedom that like now he knows what to do, which is rid the earth of his presence and move on, and you can end this sort of torment. It does all feel a little bit manic, not to focus too psychologically. He's certainly in some kind of frenzy. I don't know if he's actually got a mental condition or whatever, but like I just noticed this frenzied state kind of closely mirrors that frenzied state he was in back in the garden. I think again, it's like sad and painful to watch, but it's also kind of funny sometimes. Like, he can't take care of himself at all. He goes back to the guy that he pawned the guns to, and the guy has to like clean him up and be like, no, wash under your fingernails, use more soap. Like, how'd you get blood behind your ear? Like really, what is all this? And it is just kind of like, and he starts saying these kind of cryptic phrases and weird stuff. He talks to Fenya about jumping over a fence. You don't understand the fence, but tomorrow you'll know everything. And I don't know what point I'm driving at here, but I'm very struck by how scatterbrained he becomes. And how some of it seems to be slightly like back to the ode to joy type stuff. He's swinging back and forth between this complete despair and sort of like, glory to the highest in man, glory to the highest in me. Like, now I know what to do, and bizarre. That makes it sound like unintelligible. I think I can relate to how he feels completely crushed, but now he's suddenly pulled out of this torment. Like, is Grushenka gonna pick me or my dad? And it's like, oh, it's this other guy. Oh. Takes away it destroys his crisis and replaces it with a sort of certainty. Like, well, all hope is lost there. At least I don't have to keep hurting on that front and wondering and worrying, So there's a certain relief in maybe knowing I'm not the one, and now I can get out of the way so she can have her future.
I don't know if you guys are likers of Milton, but one of the most famous lines of Milton is, Farewell hope, and with hope farewell fear. Farewell remorse, all good to me is lost. Evil be thou my good and my everlasting joy. Which I probably shouldn't have said in this voice, sorry, but
Haunt us all.
If you're going to quote Milton, I just have to quote Houseman back to you for a second. And Melissa actually supplied me with the lines of this poem. But Malt does more than Milton can to justify God's ways.
Justify God's ways to man.
Who else was quoting that along with McGee?
What?
Nice. I made my students read that poem, and they couldn't figure out it was about beer, so that was sad. But it's okay.
Oh.
We'll get there.
Say, for what were hop yards meant, or why was Burton built on Trent?
Man, you want to talk about bad students? There was this one student who, when I was trying to help them with To Catch a Hind, they wrote a paper insisting that a hind was actually a girl's backside and that for hundreds of years, they'd gotten it wrong.
What is the book, like Hind's Feet in High Places or something like that? All right, well, anyway, we're getting way sidetracked. Does anyone have other comments on this chapter? We have the whole exchange with this guy that you pawned the guns to, and like, why are you so bloody? We have the all this rushing around to prep stuff in the shop.
I think Piotr Ilyich deserves a moment of attention and sympathy. That dude had a tough job managing manic Dmitri. Partly, again, not to go too hard on the pathology side, but like having had family members struggle with mental health issues, like I sympathize with sort of Piotr's struggles over the course of the night, where he's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" He tries to be like helpful and in some ways respectful at times, and then at the end of the day, is like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not my brother's keeper, or at the very least, I'm not Dmitri's keeper. And you're going to have to fend for yourself. And that's a very understandable and human reaction. I'm interested in what, I don't know, the gloss I was inclined to put on it at first is that just like, oh, just trying to be kind of a decent person is not enough. That will, just trying to do what seems like generically the right thing in any particular situation is not going to take you as far as, treating someone else as kin, which is what Peter doesn't really do. He's, he bails after a while. But I was really intrigued by his arc over the course of the chapter. One sec, I have a whining cat.
Yeah, I agree with that. He's like simultaneously sympathetic and a little bit troubling. I mean, to have Dmitri just show up at your doorstep covered in blood, like saying crazy stuff that makes no sense, constantly changing the story. And like your first impression is like, well, let me clean up and help my kind of friend acquaintance guy here. Like, what happened to you? You've been in a fight again? Like, he doesn't get enough information to really get a clear picture of what's going on, so you can kind of understand how he helps him along. But at the same time, you feel like he's sort of becoming an accomplice in something here. Like he has enough warning signs to ask some questions. You're kind of, it's troubling when, especially when Dmitri starts talking about shooting himself, and I'm looking at this bullet because it's going to go in my brain in the morning. And, Pyotr thinks for a little bit, like, and says, I'm going to tell somebody, I'm going to tell somebody if you keep up like this. And ultimately decides not to. I'm not sure who he would go tell and what they could do about it, but you can kind of feel his helplessness in this situation, with the same growing sense of unease, like something's not right. Really, someone should do something about this. I probably should, but what would I do? You know? And I think there's even the question, like he starts to worry, is he going to go murder this guy? Not just like, you know, shoot himself. He's a little bit worried about those pistols. Like he's trying to be like, give me back the pistols right before they ride off in the sleigh. It's also kind of weird that Dmitri is like, all right, come to my spree with me. Like, oh, I just got along. Like, come on my spree.
It's always good to have another set of prints.
I wanted to talk for a second about Dmitri's suicide note on 403. He asks for paper. He writes 2 lines, and it says, "For my whole life, I punished myself. I punished my whole life." And like it's this weird thing that Dmitri is doing at this point, where he tells Pyotr one story and then he changes it. He makes some jokes like, you know, have you ever stolen anything? He asks these weird questions, and he's like, yeah, I once stole like a certain amount, you know, from like the dresser, and I felt bad, and 3 days later I gave it back. And then, why are you asking? Oh, nothing, because I just stole from the dresser and gave it back 3 days later. But then it's like he writes this note and then he shows it to him. You know, it's like he wants people to catch on and figure out what he's doing. I don't know if he wants them to stop him or what, but it's like he keeps teasing people with enough hints to kind of know something's up. But anyway, back to that. Is there anything significant about this suicide note? Why is he punishing his whole life?
I mean, it does feel like the inverse of the forgiving all for all. It's that same sort of expansive attitude in its negative form. I don't know exactly what to do with that.
That's brilliant. I don't know what to do with it either, but yes.
There's a few little profound statements here and there that are a little more philosophical or insightful. And I can't remember. I think it's somewhere in this book. Some character says like every Russian is a philosopher or something like that. And here in Dmitri's sort of worst moment, he's still thinking about stuff. So on page 405, he makes this kind of interesting statement. They offer him oysters. He's like, no oysters, I've got no appetite. You know, my friend, he said suddenly with feeling, I've never liked all this disorder. And Pyotr thinks he's just talking about like the chaos of the shop as they run around and get oysters and champagne and stuff. And he's like, no, I don't mean that. I mean a higher order. There is no order in me, no higher order. But that's all over, nothing to grieve about. Too late, devil take it. My whole life has been disorder, and I must put it in order. Punning, am I? And he's like, you're not punning, you're raving. And then he quotes his self-composed poem again, glory to God, the highest in the world, glory to the highest in me. But this higher order and disorder thing actually kind of reminds me back to Ivan and Alyosha's discussion. Ivan kind of insisting that there needs to be a higher order and sort of ready to destroy everything if there isn't, you know, or to despair if there isn't. And here we see Dmitri kind of reaching that same point in an existential way in his own life.
Well, I noticed just like on 402 to go back, like the point where you were talking about where he's going on and on about how he might pull this bullet in his brain in the middle of 402, and he says, the bullet nonsense, I want to live, I love life, believe me, I love golden-haired Phoebus in this hot light. It sounded so much like Ivan talking about the sticky little leaves, but then he's going to dash the cup, right? Like that same sort of like tension between loving life and wanting to renounce it because he can't quite make sense of it. And I feel like that paired with what you just said, it's weird how similar they are despite their differences, that they both are like they want to love life, but there's some order or sense that's not there. Yeah.
And for him, he's looking for that sense in Grushenka. Like, if I can get together with Grushenka, we can go off into the far reaches of Russia, make a new life, and be virtuous. And we can finally be good, and I can put this order in myself, that I've always longed for but never been able to pull off.
And I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, is that on the surface, like a sort of love for humanity and a love for a woman can seem different. But I feel like there is this parallel between trying to love something on earth that isn't quite shaking out. And that for all as violent as Dmitri is, he really does have this idealistic streak. He wants to believe in something. He wants to love and give himself to something. It just isn't working for him. And that is actually an intense similarity with all his brothers.
I'm going to quote one more passage that's definitely directly relevant and some of the same things that we've been saying. This is 406, very near the top, a little speech he gives. The pistols are nonsense too. Drink and stop imagining things. I love life. I've grown to love life too much. So much it's disgusting. Enough. To life, my dear. Let us drink to life. I offer a toast to life. Why am I so pleased with myself? I'm base, but I'm pleased with myself. And yet it pains me to be base and still pleased with myself. By the way, here I'm reminded of Grushenka saying, why am I so good? Like when she's drunk a little bit later. I bless creation. I'm ready right now to bless God and his creation. Opposite of Ivan, by the way. But I must exterminate one foul insect so that it will not crawl around spoiling life for others. Which makes no sense. He just said, the pistols are nonsense, but I got to exterminate this bug. Let us drink to life, dear brother. What can be more precious than life? Nothing, nothing. To life and to one queen of queens. He's just all over the place there, but it's that exact struggle between those two sides.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's that conflict in him, and that, as Melissa said, each of the brothers trying to make some sense of order out of the disorder of life. And I think, as Melissa was talking, I was thinking about this is a sense where we really could go back and kind of, I don't know, pigeonhole isn't exactly the right word, but kind of categorize each of the brothers of how they try and make order out of the disorder of life. Alyosha turns to the monastery and to religion. Ivan tries to turn to logic and his schooling. Dmitri to this passion relationship with Grushenka. And then, I don't know if this will make sense to anybody else, but then I was thinking, what Fyodor does, their father, is he just embraces the disorder. He embraces the chaos. He becomes more and more of a buffoon rather than trying to create order. And I thought that was an interesting contrast.
Yeah, and Fyodor seems to be the one that has no need of order. Like, he's not interested in order, is kind of simply interested in, feeling good or whatever. And his sons all definitely have a definite need for order and figuring out something that they're looking for. They can't quite figure out what it is, maybe, but you're absolutely right. Fyodor is different than so many of the other characters, and he doesn't seem to have a bone in his body that needs that, except for maybe when we get hints that he feels himself lesser than others, maybe. I'm reaching there a little. You guys ready to move on to the next chapter? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Here I come.
Whew.
I'm still trying to understand exactly what state of mind Dmitri is in. And it just seems to really vacillate between this despair and this sort of joy. Another moment I would point out is page 410. In the middle of the paragraph, he's thinking about his suicide note, the loaded pistol and golden-haired Phoebus, and he's going to blast his head off. And then there's a moment where he stops and almost thinks about having the coachman stop the cart and just like, well, why wait? And let's just get it over with now. And then the next minute, he just wants to see her for just a minute. She's with him now, so I will only look at how she is with him, with her former sweetheart. That is all I want. And this is an interesting passage. And never before had such love for this woman, so fatal for his destiny, risen in his breast, such a new feeling, never experienced before, a feeling unexpected even to himself, tender to the point of prayer, to the point of vanishing before her. And I will vanish, he said suddenly, in a fit of hysterical rapture. Like he's having a kind of weird conversion moment. And as much as we've talked about his love for Grushenka, this is new for him. I'm not quite sure what it is. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, just not when I read it earlier this week, but just now when you reread it, it made me think of the whole, if you love something, let it go. Like he's kind of reaching a new level of love that's different from his jealousy of wanting to keep her all to himself. It's more pure. He wants her to be happy with whomever. I mean, it's kind of cheesy when you say it like that, when I say it like that, but I think that definitely is a different way of thinking about loving someone.
I think you have a really good point. I think the more skeptical side of this that comes out, it's funny because like now I'm the more skeptical one, is this is a cycle that happens, right? This is a cycle that happens. It's the same jealous cycle we already saw described in the first chapter where like he's having all these magnanimous feelings and he's going to just let her go. But like, how long is that going to last, right? He's able to feel this and then the next minute he's like, never mind, I'm going to go hide in a bush in my dad's yard and like hit old men in the head with a metal stick. Like, to me, this feels like another iteration of the pattern. And I've already said I feel really sympathetic to this, not because I've ever done any of those things, but because I understand that this is like capturing this psychological I feel like there's this moment where he's so generous and gonna, and that's like, that tag is where I feel like what your point was earlier, maybe he hasn't totally given up hope. I feel like in some moments he has, and he's like, yes, I will take myself out of the equation. It's fine. And then a few minutes later, he's like, well, but maybe, I don't know. Like, I feel like we're just seeing these patterns going around and around. And I really believe, and that's partly why when the narrator says that he like commits to every new passion that he has, that like in the carriage, having written his suicide note, he's like totally committed to this very dramatic sort of theatrical idea that he's going to go and say his last proclamations and throw a huge party and take himself out. And that maybe a couple hours later, it's like, well, but maybe not, right? Like, I feel like we're just seeing this in real time kind of playing out in his mind. And that's part of what feels so manic about it is, but that's where to me it's like it's not entirely just about showing a psychological disorder. It's how many of us feel as humans, is that we can commit to one moment like, no, I'm really going to do the noble thing, though in this case the noble thing is not sane or right, but it's like he's really like, I really am going to let them go, but then a little bit further into the situation he's going to change his mind.
And I think it's really important too, Melissa, that you pointed out it's a cycle. Like, this is a cyclical nature. This is something he goes round and round. Not it's just one way and back the other way. But it repeats.
Yeah. Well, because I guess I'm just saying if we're tracing patterns throughout the novel, that's one thing I think we're seeing in a lot of characters is the way you go round and round. And we saw it from early on with Fyodor, right? And that was part of what Father Zosima was trying to call him out on. Like, you get wounded, you get aggrieved, you think you're hurt. You're actually not. It's the cycle you play out. And we see it with Madame Koklakov, and we see it with Katya, and we're just seeing it with so many characters that part of the wound, the laceration, the whatever, the strain is that we all are caught in these cyclical patterns, and it might look really, really different for all of us, but everyone has some pattern they're just going to play out. And unless something intervenes in your life, you're just going to be like back at Mockroy having another $50,000 party. I mean, we've all been there, right? No.
A couple of times. We got another one coming up.
Peggy, you didn't invite us.
I usually don't invite friends, you know.
It's a spur of the moment decision. It's just whoever you can find. Bring the peasants in. Go wake up the Jews. Anybody, get them over here. So something really, really fascinating happens on page 411 and 412, where going over all this stuff in his head, he starts to have this philosophical, theological conversation with his driver. And kind of like decide by fate, and like, you know, I highlighted almost all of page 412. On 411, he starts by I think the driver is actually kind of worried. Like, am I an accomplice to a crime here? I'm driving you to the guy you're going to go kill. You're going to go murder this rival or whatever. And so he explains, well, you're a coachman. You know how to get out of the way, right? Like, don't run people over, you know? And the coachman gets kind of theological. He's like, oh, you're right. One mustn't run a man down or torment him, or any other creature either. For every creature has been created. This is kind of funny. A horse, for example. Because there's people that just barrel on regardless. Some of those coachmen, let's say, and there's no holding him back. He just keeps pushing right on. And Mitya is like, to hell? And then he basically asks his driver, like, you tell me, am I going to hell? Did this page strike you guys? Do you have some thoughts on this one? I thought this was pretty fascinating, and I don't want to just read you the whole page, but the driver kind of quotes a sort of popular legend or something, and ultimately says, well, Dmitri, you're simple-hearted, and, you know, you could be, God will forgive you because of your simple heart. I was a little struck by this section. I thought it's like a confession. Like, he has to confess to somebody what he's up to. And he needs someone else to weigh in on, like, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah, I think that the bit about this having a simple heart really struck me, and just the childlike. I mean, that's so common, right? In lots of discussions of Christianity, is a talk of, you know, childlike faith, or being like a child, or, you know, being simple and being forgiven in that. It also struck me when he asked for forgiveness for everyone. Like, that's what's the phrase that showed up in previous books? That for all and
before all.
And,
yeah.
That echoed that. Asking forgiveness of this coachman on behalf of the whole world, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to do a Zosima-like move here, but he's doing it in a desperate state for the wrong reasons, or some, you know, something weird like that. Or maybe it's not for the wrong reasons. Like, maybe there's part of him that's just kind of confronting his wretchedness and basically saying, I'm this broken guy in this horrible cycle that I can't get out of, and this is what I do. And so, this all ends with a kind of prayer at the bottom of the page. It's sort of a prayer for mercy and a simultaneous acknowledgement of like, I'm a jerk and I can't do anything else. So I think this is probably worth reading out loud. Lord, take me in all my lawlessness, but do not judge me. Let me pass without your judgment. Do not judge me, for I have condemned myself. Do not judge me, for I love you, Lord. I am loathsome, but I love you. If you send me to hell, even there I will love you, and from there I will cry that I love you unto ages of ages. But let me also finish with loving. Finish here and now with loving, for 5 hours only, till your hot ray. For I love the queen of my soul. I love her and cannot not love her. You see all of me. I will gallop up, I will fall before her. You are right to pass me by. Farewell and forget your victim, never trouble yourself.
I feel like we discussed this in a previous week, and now I can't exactly remember the discussion. This is a question for people in the Orthodox Church. In the Orthodox Church, is there the idea that all suicides go to hell?
I think that yes, in the context of this book, and like we heard Zosima talk about that idea earlier. Like he said, sort of officially on the record, you're not supposed to pray for the suicide because it's such an egregious sin. But I say it is okay to pray for them. And so I think you see this idea that that's kind of the official word, but there's also the movement of love is to embrace and want to be united with even those who have made these terrible decisions in these horrible moments. So there's a sort of there's a universal streak in this too, and that's not totally absent in the church either. So I mean, it's maybe minority, but I think what you said, would be kind of like, I don't know that anyone would say that nowadays, but
no one's gonna say it's okay to kill yourself.
But like it's definitely like, I think that would have been the way it would have been read at the time for sure, and so it makes it all the more interesting of a prayer from Dmitri if he is contemplating suicide right there.
I want to call out that last sentence. Farewell and forget your victim. Never trouble yourself.
Yeah, what is that?
Is he talking to God in that sentence? Is your victim? Is that referring to Dmitri? Is he just like, I don't know.
I don't know what that means at all.
Is he like, I'm consigning myself to hell as well along those same thought lines?
Oh, maybe so. Maybe like, I'm scum and like I'm gonna try to love you, but I'm so broken I really can't, and just dismiss me. Maybe. Like, I don't know. But then
It's like, if I'm gonna go to hell, at least I get the chance to like try to go with Grushenka for a bit or something more kind of idea. I just need to get to Grushenka, and like, thanks for giving me the opportunity and not taking me right now as I'm about to like kill myself. So like, but now that that's the case, like, I'm just this piece of garbage, and you should just like, you shouldn't love me anyway, more or less. But I still love you. And it's like really, really like, Dimitri's like out of this world. Like, can't figure him out. Yeah, I think if there's a character that I can't figure out, it's Dmitri.
Again, I'm just saying I see an Yvonne parallel, because Yvonne's whole thing was like, listen, if I can't make sense of the moral universe, I'm out. right? And I feel like this is a similar sort of moment. And again, in different terms, it's not exactly the same, but it's a character that's saying, if I can't make sense of this the way I know how to think of the world, why should I stay here? And I think again, I just like, it's never struck me so clearly before that Ivan is always the sort of philosophical voice of this novel, and Dmitri's dismissed as kind of hot-headed, crazy guy. But it's like they're both articulating in different ways this feeling of, I had a way of looking at the world that's not making sense. Why shouldn't I leave on my own terms? Like, why should I stay if it's all just stupid anyway?
I think what makes Dmitri interesting in light of all that is that he somehow maintains this weird ode to joy jubilation, and proclaims that he's even going to love God from hell. But at the same time, sort of sees himself as irredeemable, as this by nature wretched insect that can't do anything but ruin other people's lives. So his proper place in the universe actually is hell. And he's going to praise God from there, but finally everyone else can forget him and he'll be out of the way, not ruining people's lives. It's kind of, I have a hard time fully understanding, where is his love of God coming from? Like, where is the jubilation side coming from in these moments?
I'm not sure if it's really a true joy. I think it's like this kind of like false thing. Like, I don't know. I think he like celebrates in his like independence or something, like his freedom or something. Like, it's very strange. Like he's gonna like put himself in hell and he's happy about it, or just for like one more moment with Grushenka, like I'm gonna put myself in hell. Like, this is great. Like, thanks God, and you can like set me out of the way, like Grushenka can set me out of the way as well. Like, it's like a parallel like type of exchange, like. Which is what I find interesting.
But that's, I mean, I'm going to disagree, because I don't think it's that different from Ivan. We saw Ivan saying the sticky little leaves, right? Like, he has these moments of really intense joy. And I think this is where I've always said I'm both Ivan and Dmitri. I don't think like now this reading, I'm seeing they're not necessarily as diametrically opposed. Even if one is rational and one is angry, they're both seeing a world that's at odds with their sense-making system. But it's like, it's entirely possible, I think, for some of the most sensitive souls to both feel intense joy and to feel intense frustration of the joy, right? And it's not just like, oh, I want one more moment with this woman, but it's like, can we celebrate these moments that feel so powerful and real and true and glorious, and also acknowledge that they're just going away forever? Like, I don't think that's the whole picture. I think that Dostoevsky would say there's another piece that they're missing, but I feel like that's where we see again that parallel, that they have experienced a joy and they're not willing to just throw that out. Like, true nihilism is saying none of that really happened, right? Like, none of that matters. It's all a wash. And all of these characters are saying, I felt something real and I want to make sense of it, but I can't quite. And that is heartbreaking. And that's where I think I relate to so many of them, is there isn't a quick, simple answer, and anyone that will tell you there is just lying, because they're uncomfortable with that dissonance. The dissonance between living a human life and seeing both the beauty, the generosity. Because I feel like, I think we can be so quick to be like, oh, it's just like Dmitri hanging out with his whore girlfriend or whatever. But it's like, he has love. He feels something intense and real and true with her, and that feels better than his whole life, and he's willing to start over and be a new person for her. And Ivan feels the same way about humanity. It's like, many of us can see those moments and also see the people shooting kids in the face, or like that sometimes Grushenka is going to go choose Fyodor instead. Like, I don't know. They're trying to make sense of all these things they see in front of them. I don't know. That resonates really, really deeply with me. Am I the only one that's like, I felt both of those?
Well, what I'm trying to understand is, where is Dimitri's, not just joy, but why is he proclaiming he's going to love God no matter what? Where is that motion coming from? He seems to have developed this great resolve that he wants to live, I don't know, a virtuous life or whatever, and have concluded that that's basically impossible for him because of his Karamazov nature. And so he's going to remove himself from the picture, and go ahead and suffer, but he'll still praise God somehow from hell. And then there's this other interesting thing happening here, which is like, give me one last chance to love for 5 minutes, and then let me be done with love forever, because this has been way too much, you know? Like, I think this whole paragraph is just something really important going on in him, and I am not sure exactly how to describe it, but I do relate to some of it. But I find it surprising that he's like, where is this? Why is it that Ivan like questions God to the point of declaring all things are permissible, but Dmitri basically is like, I'm going to love God even if I go to hell, and I recognize all your rules even if I broke them the whole way, you know?
I think it's like despair.
But that's where I guess I'm
Like,
just saying I don't think
Dmitri-
they're that different, because Ivan says, I'm willing to say the lion will lie down with the lamb, but I reject it. And to me, that seems the same thing Dmitri is saying, is like, I love God, but I'm going to go to hell and love God. Like, that is the same to me as returning your ticket. Is like, great, there's universal harmony now, hallelujah, but F you. Like, they seem to both have that tension in them.
I don't see any FU in Dmitri, though.
He's going to shoot himself in the head.
Yeah, but that's
I
about
think
the
there's
failed romance.
I
I
saw
think there's
like
something we should look at, and that is there is the same tension in both of them, and they're both in different kinds of despair. But when you see that they're both, because you see, when I read this, my take on it was always that Dmitri, in some ways, almost feels like he's already in hell. And what I mean by that is, what is the thing that Ivan and Dmitri have in common in their tension, in this place of despair? Everything revolves around the I. Like, even as Dmitri says, I will praise you in hell, I will be telling you how I love you, right? If we were to read, say, the account of an ecstatic saint, the account of the ecstatic saint would not be constantly dwelling on what they're saying about God, but rather their attention is on God. And I think the thing with Dmitri is, I think he thinks his attention is on God, and he's ecstatic in a certain point, but he's self-destructive because he's turning inward. And I don't think he understands that he's turning inward. And I think what we see in both characters is an example of turning inward, but I don't know if there's the awareness of that's what's going on. And I think that's where the tension, where the self-made hell is really similar. Because in both cases, despair, suicide, regardless if one wants to think of it bad theologically, the idea of why it would put someone in hell is because it's turning them inside. And that's what I'm really thinking, is that ultimately Dmitri does not see a way out of just his being Dmitri.
I was going to succinctly say that he has self-awareness, a mix of self-awareness and maybe some military discipline to know that, like, I broke the rules, I'm getting what I deserve, but that doesn't mean I have to hate it.
And I was going to say a few minutes ago, in response to a question of where is some of this joy coming from if he's going to kill himself, I think we're seeing some of the joy in having a plan, having made a decision, having decided that that this is the right thing to do, to take myself out of the picture. I mean, it's already been said earlier in this book that each time he has a new plan, he gets really, really passionate about it and really, really loves it. And this is his latest plan.
It's like rebellion. It's like he takes joy in his rebellion.
Kind of.
Well, and if we're doing the mental health thing, that's a documented phenomenon, is once people make a plan, they actually become euphoric often. And that's one of the red flags of a suicide case, is that they become at peace or even happy and joyful because they're no longer in the agony of indecision.
Right, and this is like this glory thing is all about revolving around himself. It's not glory to God in the highest, which is like permutation. It's glory to the highest in me. Like, it's totally turned inward upon himself, like, and so it leads to his despair, but then like this plan and this rebellion against this is like leading to his euphoria. I don't think it's like a true joy. It's not like a true joy from God or of love or anything. I think it's like a joy or euphoria from his plan and his rebellion.
I get the sense that part of him thinks he's acting out justice on God's behalf. Like, well, I've been a cruel and wicked insect on the face of the earth, and you may be willing to spare me, but it's like time that I stop bringing this filth on everyone else,
Right.
Well, and that would be interesting if we're reading these as a different take on rebellion and the Grand Inquisitor, is that Ivan seems to be frustrated that humanity as a whole isn't getting any justice. And Dmitri's this weird perverted version of, instead of on behalf of all and for all accepting mercy or grace or forgiveness, like, oh, I'll wipe myself out. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a weird martyrdom. Like, cool, if humanity's all sin and effed up, like, if I take myself out, maybe that will fix it. I feel like that's very poignant if you read it that way, like very troubling and sad. If Zosima is telling us we should be praying for the suicides and we have Dmitri as this potential suicide, we see that some of these people literally think, oh, maybe I can fix something by taking myself out of the equation because humanity is so broken.
What's this
like,
whole idea
wow,
of, like,
that's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's where I want to insist on for a minute before we quickly move on. It's like, that's heartbreaking. And as Dmitri, as angry as he is, like, we're seeing the sadness of this pathology that humans don't know true love, and they're then willing to like wipe themselves out as a result.
What's this worthlessness that he has, like this despair, this insect, it's just like he's not worth anything. Like, he doesn't see himself as being worthy of anything, and like his best move he can do for anyone and for all is to take that worthlessness out of the equation.
But I think partly what I'm insisting on is part of the novel that keeps getting insisted on is I too am Karamazov, right? So it's not just about it being an individual pathology. It's like somehow part of the human condition is we don't see ourselves as lovable or worthy or valuable. And so we either think all of humanity needs to be wiped out or we need to wipe ourselves out, right? Like, this isn't just one man's mental problem. For me, that's the textual argument that I have, that part of what Dostoevsky is saying is part of the human condition is most of us don't see that love. Most of us don't learn to fully embrace it.
It's kind of like Ivan versus Dmitri. Ivan wants to wipe out the rest of humanity, and Dmitri wants to wipe out humanity from himself. Like,
yeah, but I'm saying those are two different like twists on the same problem.
Yeah.
If you don't see, like, if you don't have the narrative of divine love, like, something's got to give, and it might be them and it might be me, but something's gonna break. Yeah. That sounds way too excited about horrible things, but like,
that was still a mic drop moment, though, in spite of its horribleness.
maybe it's a mic drop moment because my soul has felt those things, like, yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, it's not just you. I don't know if this voice says that, but it does.
Now it's very Tom Waits sort of happening instead of
that
Batman.
voice has seen things, man.
Right? Not to diminish what you're saying.
I mentioned Tom Waits in an email to your husband, so right now, like, I'm in so much pain because I'm laughing.
Oh, I'm sorry, Micah. I didn't mean to hurt you.
Oh no, it's awesome, and I'm getting so much phlegm up. This is such a blessing.
I'm in so much pain because I'm laughing is a very Dostoevsky sentiment.
I was gonna say it's a blessing I'm coughing up phlegm is very Dmitri in this moment, right? Like praise God.
Better out than in.
Oh.
We gotta move on. Chapter 7, former and indisputable one. This is probably my other favorite chapter in this section. Like where Dmitri just shows up, like he's like, sneak me into a dark room where I'll creepily lurk in the background for a while, and then somebody spring in the middle of their conversation. Like, I promise I'll stay out of the way, but
everything I learned about dating.
I learned from Dostoevsky.
So I just love the tension in this scene with these Polish guys. And what are you doing? Here we are.
Wait, hang on, Mitya, real quick. There's another IE at the very last sentence of chapter 6.
Oh, you're right.
Yep.
Okay.
Because he just sprang into the room and Grushenka shrieked time.
Sorry, now we can move on.
That's at least 5 or 6 now.
Well, on the next page, we have our first IE from a man.
Yes! What a grip! It's Kalganov. This is seriously distracting me. I cannot think. This is exactly what Dmitri did.
I thought it was part of Dmitri.
Except he was drinking vodka instead of water.
So I kind of love this whole chapter with the very subtle like interpersonal back and forth as tension grows between Grushenka and her officer that's returned, and she's like growing more and more disgusted with him. The Poles and their particular like antipathy towards Dmitri and the other people that are having a good time, basically. There's just so much social tension in this chapter.
It's kind of interesting that the Russians are the ones that are having a good time, and the Poles are the ones that are antithesis to this.
Yeah.
No one gets my joke, but that's fine.
Was that an Orthodox joke?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Russians are not known for having a good time in our church. Happy birthday. Happy birthday. I don't know where to start in this chapter. Anyone have a suggestion?
Can we start by refreshing my memory? I'm pretty sure that earlier in the book we're supposed to have met both Kalganov and
Maximov.
Maximov, but I don't remember who they are. Can somebody refresh my memory?
So these are characters from the scandal scene at the monastery. So Kalganov is like Myasov. You remember Myasov? The kind of pretentious older guy who, you know, had almost been taking part in the revolution in France, and is so important that his liberal ideas, you know, are respected. Kalganov is like his younger relative that he brings along. Kalganov says about 2 words in that whole scene. He's mostly just along, but
wait, isn't Kalganov the Polish guy that Grushenka's in love with?
Negative.
She was petting his hair when Dmitri first came in.
Okay.
That was it.
I'm actually not sure that we get the name of her officer.
No, I don't think they ever say his name. They say
We have the bodyguard tall guy is Pan Vrublevsky. But yeah, Kalganov is just a young guy.
Okay.
Who is a relative of Myasov and really didn't have much of a role earlier, except that he said how vile when Fyodor like said some complete nonsense at the end of that meal. Maximov is von San, if you remember the murdered. Like he's the little landowner that was following them around, and he's the guy that runs and jumps in the coach to come along when Fyodor goes.
Gets thrown out.
And then he gets pushed out. Okay.
Yeah, and that is exactly the moment that intrigues Kalganov. He's like, what a weird guy. Like, and that's when they start hanging out. So that's who those 2 are. Yeah.
And then, yeah, going with Melissa's confusion, I did think it was odd that Grushenka seems, through most of this scene, to be kind of flirting with Kalganov, and mostly ignoring her officer. So I'm kind of
Yeah, totally.
I'm wondering what happened between the time when her officer picked her up and she was going to go have a whole new life and marry him, and now when she seems not interested in him at all.
He also seems not just interested in her, to be honest. He's kind of sitting on the couch on the far side, like bored with the party. So.
And I think the narrator does say, or maybe not even the narrator, maybe it's them talking to each other later in the chapter. I don't remember exactly where. But at some point, they're kind of like, you're not the person you were 5 years ago. Well, you're not either. So I wonder if it's just that disillusionment or if something more is happening.
This does get to the interesting question that I brought up earlier when we spoke about love. And so Grushenka has had this 5 years of torment, like where she's been sort of at the same time beating herself up for falling for this jerk and then also wanting him back. And he suddenly returns, but like he doesn't seem the same. And she explains herself some of her issues, like, you know, he's got this real affected demeanor now, like he's all formal all the time. He sort of made some formal speech when she first got to him, and she's like, "Who are you? You know, is this the same guy that used to sing songs to me and make jokes? You know?" And you can just see it. That's partly why I love this whole scene, is you can see her figuring out during the course of the scene, like, this guy sucks. Like, kind of hate him, and she's getting more and more irritated that he keeps shutting down all the fun and, you know, kind of refusing to give any, he doesn't show any of his cards. And that, I didn't mean that pun, because there's definitely some stuff going on with cards too. He's got a lot of cards. But it was so, I actually started to wonder for a second if this was not even the same guy. Like if someone had come in as an imposter. I found myself wondering that, and then I concluded no. But she seems kind of shocked. I also, it's really interesting to watch Dmitri in this chapter. He just sort of bursts in like an idiot. And then there's a phrase that describes him as like, he has the expression like a guilty pup that's been let back in the room and patted on the head. And it's like, they're talking about silly things that he doesn't even know. Kalganov's like, Maximov keeps lying, and he's saying all these goofy stories. And you can just see Dmitri kind of looking back and forth eagerly between them, like overly enthusiastic in the conversation just because he's so desperate to be accepted in the room or whatever. Somebody else please say something about this chapter.
Well, I find it interesting that he arrives with like such despair and then he just like jumps right into it and like has a complete reversal. Like here he is like, oh, I actually feel happy now and like interested in the conversation, not dejected and despairing and about to kill myself. Like I'm going to get involved with this conversation and it's going to be great. And it's like, oh, this guy's really boring. Maybe I could have a lead in or something. I don't know. I don't know what's going through his head. Like this is where I find him very complicated.
He completely throws himself into it.
Yeah.
Like with the greatest zeal. Like if we're gonna play cards,
like me,
100 rubles, then you know if we're gonna like tell funny stories, let's laugh like scarily too earnestly, you know.
It's like he just really wants to get the party started, but there's no party.
That is one of the really ironic things I think is that he's just been on this like spending spree where he spent like, by today's standards, like who knows how many thousands of dollars on party supplies, and he rolls up here and there's like two bored Polish guys and the whole town is asleep
Well, he wants like Grushenka to be like with this like awesome guy because it's like, well, if he's gonna have her, like it's gonna be awesome, right? Like,
yeah, and he actually goes out of his way to convince himself that he's still cool. Like there's this, I remember there's this whole page with these passages of like, well, and so what if he has a really crappy wig that's obviously from Siberia and just complete garbage, and
come forward.
it even had to be this way, like, you know. He's like, that's not a problem. And what if he has this like jerk bodyguard? You know, that makes sense. Like all these weird things. Like he's short, he's fat, he's like disinterested. Good for her. Like, like I'll get out of the way. You know.
Left it.
Which I have to say, like, good for him. How many of us have seen our ex with somebody and been that generous? Right? I mean, he's trying. Like, that's where I feel like however insane or like manic his idea is, he's trying, right? Like, this guy sucks. This guy clearly sucks, and he's really trying. Instead of being like, yes, this guy sucks, I have a chance, he's really trying. That's all I wanted to say. It's like that to me seems even crazier than some of the other stuff that, like, instead of Shunkin being like, awesome, like I'm a military officer and I'm kind of hot and I might have stolen money, but I've got money and all this booze. He's like, oh, he's got a terrible wig and he's short and fat and boring. Like, he's probably great. Like,
I mean, he's in a desperate state, right? Most of the time when people get to see their person they like with someone else, they've had time to think about it and stalk them on Instagram and and know the strengths and weaknesses.
But then, of course, by the end of the chapter, he tries to pay him to go away. So, you know, he eventually comes around to the realization that
he comes too.
It's the cheating on the cards and the exclamation of public slut. I mean, those are the lines.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, that'll get you cut.
I think there's a lot of fun and interesting kind of tension and stuff with the Poles and the Russians and their attitudes towards each other. But by far the most interesting moment to me has to be when Grushenka's officer declares that he came back willing to forgive her and overlook, you know, her past. And she's like, wait a minute, you came to forgive me? Like, you're the jerk that ran off and ditched me. You know, that has got to be the, like, you know, needle off the record moment right there.
I am not pusillanimous.
I dare say to the contrary, sir.
Did he say I'm magnanimous after that?
Yeah. Yeah, and then Dmitri comes out and defends her, and she's like, how dare you defend me? Like, she's just like pissed at everybody.
Yeah, Grushenka is where the interesting stuff is going on in this chapter to me. As she's sort of coming to, you know, realize this is not the same person that I was in love with. I kind of hate this guy now. And she's just, I think, constantly like, what did it mean that I fell in love with this guy and that I nursed these feelings for 5 years? That seems to be her big dilemma is, you know, she says in this chapter, it was just for spite. I loved you for spite or something like that. But then in the next chapter, she breaks down in tears and says, no, I really did love him. And I just think she's going through really difficult moment and some kind of I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's some greatness of character in Grushenka that's happening here.
I'd like to throw it out there that I thought of this, but that Dmitri and Grushenka like have the same sort of problem where they're both like realizing that they're trying to love a figment and like loving out of spite, and then they like kind of get past that at the same time. Grushenka spitefully loving Dmitri's father and this other guy, and Dmitri loving Grushenka out of spite for his father and all this other stuff. So it's like kind of, or despite the other, whatever her name, the Kolikov or daughter, yeah, can't remember her name right now, Katerina. It's like all this spiteful love kind of going against each other, but a lot of parallels is what I see.
I mean, I guess I find them falling into mutual despair more than anything else. I have trouble seeing them kind of develop, showing much growth and development in these chapters. It's just like, well, everything's gone to shit. May as well clutch onto each other.
Wasn't it the kind of the idea of like they all had these big plans? Like Grushenka was gonna like, well, I met this guy a long time ago, but like if he comes back, like everything is gonna be so great. And like Dmitri's like, well, if I just get like Grushenka and like get $3,000, everything's gonna be great, and like everything's going to crap for both of them.
And I do think it's important, too, that in our last talk, we were talking about how the big moment between Alyosha and Grushenka was Grushenka decides she'll take a chance on this guy. And from the get-go, Ginny was like, no, don't. But I do think, like, for her, we talked about, like, even though it seems she's held this for years, and she's willing to at least be honest, right? Like, I've loved this man angrily for years. I'm going to at least try and love him. So I think there's at least some change that's happening in her, and I don't know if I see it yet in Dmitri, where she's like, crap, I've been loving a freaking fantasy. Like, this guy sucks, right? And that seems parallel to what we've seen where this, like, loving out of spite or, like, refusing money out of a wound. Like, she's someone who's finally coming face to face with this, like, I've held on and now I might actually win, but I'm not sure I want to win with this guy because he sucks. Like, that does seem, but she's also wasted. So, like, let's admit, like, there's many scenes where they're talking about how drunk she is, and she just wants to go dance now. So I feel like it's this mixed up. She's both having character growth and then being like, but I'm so drunk, let us just dance. So it's a little. But then
I can't dance. I actually can't dance.
You can't, Taggy, or you're ventriloquizing for Grushenka right now?
Both.
No, I think it's the dumb Polish officer who can't dance or doesn't want to dance or won't dance because he's boring and dumb.
I think Michael's referring to the moment in the next chapter when she picks up a handkerchief and is about to do some kind
Break
of
dancing or something
thing, and then kind of tilts her head back and just about falls over and is like, "Oh, sorry, actually, no dance."
Actually, not doing that. I'm done.
I forgot about that moment.
I mean, I've already said we've all been there. We've all been to Mokroy and spent a year's salary, right? And we've all fallen over with our handkerchief. All right.
You haven't been to any Greek weddings. Everyone falls over with their handkerchiefs.
I want photographic proof of you falling over with your handkerchief.
Am I the person who pronounces handkerchief? Okay.
Handkerchief.
Okay.
I swing with the company.
Would anyone like to make any other comments? I feel like there's a lot more that could be said about this chapter, but it's getting late, and I want to move on to wrap up. Anything else on chapter 7?
Maximov Sappho Phaon burn is like pretty solid. When you start Googling, it basically says, "You're in love with me. Why haven't you killed yourself yet?"
Well, and you know what? While he's saying that as a third party, it somehow seems fitting to this whole scenario.
Sure.
Well, I just think that, I don't know, I feel like the more we listen to this whole affair, I just want to say again that Dostoevsky's a friggin' genius. Just because, just the layers of everything going on with Grushenka, and, you know, she thought she wanted this thing, and then she comes in contact with it, and then maybe she doesn't now that she's experiencing the reality, and that, you know, there's this thing in her mind, and that, you know, now that thing in her mind is kind of this, well, you know, bald Polish guy. I mean, I don't know. There's just something amazing about how, in spite of all of this, right? Like, there's all of this going on, and you can be totally captivated by this scene, but yet it's like the greatest soap opera that's ever been written. And I was thinking, this is a fucking soap opera. Oh, pardon my language. Because I'm thinking to myself, did I just forget the fact that, like, Dmitri left Grigory bleeding in the road, like, or in the alley, like, like somehow this made me forget about all that. But if it were me, I'd still be thinking about that. But yet somehow it managed to make me forget, and I'm just enthralled that, like, that I can be so caught up in this will he or won't he kind of stuff that I forget the blood in the alley.
That is a great transition to chapter 8, because that's where we get both happening. You know, I do think I totally agree. I completely forgot about that in the last chapter. You're just kind of like, what is going to happen with Grushenka and Dmitri and whatever. Here's where all his dreams start to come true. You know, he gets her back. Things look good. You know, the money's not a problem. Like, you know, we'll pay back Katya. We'll do it right. But then he's tormented by the memory of this blood, and is Grigory alive or not? You know, like, and it's just like, this is again just painful, I think, because you know, there's definitely the part in all of us that's the trained romantic comedy, you know. I didn't mean rom-com. I mean comedy, like in the play sense. We want to see, you know, the lovers get together or whatever. But it's really doomed and fated here that you can't run away from the blood in the alley, as Micah just put it. So it's kind of a maddening chapter to read, because it's like, oh, the happy ending is sort of happening, but it's really not happy at all. And by the way, boy, do Russian, like, folk songs suck. Like,
Why do you think they're sad all the time?
One of my favorite parts of this chapter is when Maximov gets really excited and does this dance and sings his own song, and it's like the piggy goes oink, 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 and the ducky goes quack, quack, quack. I'm like, this is like the Sodom and Gomorrah spree. Is someone singing like children's songs about farm animals?
What, you don't sing songs about farm animals at all your orgies?
I do, but the lyrical content is very different.
I'm just hoping the farm animals aren't involved.
So back to Dostoevsky, away from the pit.
You know about the pit? You've heard about the pit?
You, I see you.
All right.
But now there's nowhere to go, so awkward silence and
That's
farm
why
animals.
you have the pit.
Aaron.
You keep inviting me.
I think what's interesting to see happening in this chapter is Grushenka coming around to like, maybe I will acknowledge love for Dmitri. You know, maybe it is more than an hour, and like she starts to echo some of the same thoughts that he was having earlier about, man, if we could just run off somewhere and start a new life and be virtuous. And it's like, eventually I'm going to a convent, you know, I promise you that. Like, and we should probably talk about some of her crazy language that starts to percolate out there about, like, you know, whatever, I'll be your slave, I'll be whatever, kiss me, beat me, whatever. Page 439, like, I mean, she's drunk and everybody's drunk, so there's lots of over-the-top melodrama here, but what do you guys think is happening with Grushenka in relation to Dmitri? Is she just so glad to be free of the, you know, 5 years of the torment of her officer, you know, or is she really coming around to love Dmitri? Does she just want to get drunk and forget everything, and then this is the rebound or whatever, you know? Curious to hear what you guys think is going on in Grushenka's heart in this chapter.
I don't know that, but I just have to say the language is so similar to what Katya said, right? When she was
right.
like, yay, I will come be your rug or whatever.
Dmitri has that effect on everyone.
Not I.
Eventually.
She calls him a falcon. A falcon walked in, and my heart sank inside me. You fool. This is the one you love, my heart whispered to me at once. You walked in and brightened everything. And she seems to be somehow, like, very moved that he's afraid of something, and it's not the Poles and the officer, it's that he's afraid of her. I'm just speculating here, but I kind of wonder if this is some sort of thing going on about how she realizes she might be lovable outside of that officer who rejected her, you know, and doesn't have to be taken back by that guy.
Well, I think so, and I think there's also just like the normal, like, I don't know, I'm a guy and I'm scared to ask this girl I'm interested out for a number. Like, that's kind of cute and stuff, I'm sure. I'm not a girl that has a guy like chasing after me, but I'm sure it's kind of cute.
Totally context dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want guys to ask for my number. I want them to drop $70,000 on a champagne party. McGee, I'm really not sure why we're married. You never did that.
Well, I thought you had all the money, dear, and you were going to take care of our flight to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, it didn't work out so well. I thought you were a falcon.
That is just a drake.
Ouch.
I mean, I'm joking around because I really don't know what to say. I don't know what to say about these scenes.
Yeah, I mean, you asked what I think is actually going on in Grushenka's heart, and I'm like, well, I don't know, because she's drunk. Like, maybe ask her tomorrow. But, I mean, I think there definitely is a sense of relief. Like, being able to let go of those 5 years of feelings and to see a potential different path for your life is freeing. And I mean, I don't know. She did say that she truly loved Dmitri for that one whole hour, and there might be something in her realizing, like, it doesn't just have to be for that hour. Like, this could be more than that. On the other hand, maybe it's just a drunken rebound. I don't know. Wait till she sobers up and see.
I think this is the whole premise behind the movie, like The Notebook, but...
Wait, you have to say more now. Like, what? And I
What's that?
don't really know the Notebook,
Like
but I'm
it's
just
like this guy who's like always been like with this girl, and like they never really actually get together except for like at the very end after like they're super old and like they realize they were always there for each other and everything else. It's kind of like this melodrama, like romantic comedy type thing. But you should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's not a bad movie.
I watch it every night at 2 a.m.
it does not
Explains a
does
lot,
not sound
Aaron.
like there's enough kung fu in that for me. I need more kicking.
No, that was me as you tagging.
Oh, sorry.
Ooh.
Oh, I'll see you out back with my 2 pistols.
Boys, can't you just drink some champagne and sing a farm animal song and move past this?
I was gonna say the book is so much better than the movie. So.
Why don't someone carry both of these guys and lock them in a room next door?
Then you wouldn't have anything to laugh about. I mean,
I can't believe
you guys
I'm
would have the
going to
most
be
boring
one doing
conversation
this.
ever.
Hey, Mike is trying to say something.
I can't believe I'm going to be the one doing this, but I'll try to actually put us back on track for once.
What the hell's wrong with you?
I don't know. Maybe it's the flu, but I was wondering if anyone else thought when Dmitri is frightened, if maybe he's just seeing some of the things that are very frightening within himself in Grushenka, because you're seeing someone drunk and fickle and passionate, and you really don't know where their affection is going to land. And I don't know. I don't know. I just couldn't. I couldn't help but feel amused. I mean, like, because I just couldn't help but think, now you know what it feels like, you son of a. I mean, you know, and I'm actually a big fan of Dmitri, but at the same time, like, I was just thinking to myself, you know, if only there weren't so much drinking involved, there could be so much self-awareness going on.
I don't know. I think he's got butterflies. And he's about to kill himself, which is his other plan B. Plan A, plan B. I don't know which one it is, but. And he wants to have a party. I don't know. Dimitri's kind of vacuous at this point. I don't know where he's going. Why is he scared? Is he scared because he's going to see Grushenka and like she's going to change and hate him? Or she's going to love him and it's going to like throw another wrench in his plans, because really he just wants to get rejected by Grushenka so he can go and kill himself in peace, I think.
You think he wants to get rejected so he can kill himself? I mean, I sort of read it as the suicide was the plan to get him out of the way so she could be with this other guy who was going to be good for her, and he was trying to recognize was good for her, but once it became apparent that he's not, doesn't that change?
I think it's one and the same. I mean, I think the rejection seals the deal for him, but he doesn't get it.
To get back to the present on this chapter, I can't remember. In chapter 8, he knows the good news. The Poles are out of the picture. Does he still have a moment of like suicidal thought in this chapter? I can't remember.
Yeah.
I thought he might, like.
Yeah, he does.
Because, like, he's just now haunted of, I got this opportunity, but it's still kind of doomed because of, the violence just before. Was that the context? I don't remember where that was. We don't have to find it, but it seems like he's still going both directions, kind of joy and despair in this chapter too.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of 436, he has the moment with the terrible, awful light. He has that thought: if I'm going to shoot myself, what better time than now? Go get the pistol, bring it here, end everything in this dark and dingy corner.
Well, and I do feel like too, even by 442, they've moved on to this very drunken, like, maybe we'll be together, but the whole plan is like, cool, we'll go love each other alone in Siberia, right? Where it's like
prison camps are.
Yeah, exactly. Where the prison camps are, where it's freezing cold, where you're going to die soon anyway. Like, it's a very desperate kind of love that they seem to be imagining.
Well, I think that what they know is that they could probably start a mine together.
Oh, yeah, you're probably right. That's probably exactly.
Madam Kokakov.
How did you know?
Grushenka, wait, I've thought this all through and I have a plan.
Destiny.
Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up in this chapter? Or should we wrap it up for the night?
Well, I mean, I feel like we've been. Yes,
And
like
he
the
gets
last
arrested.
2 pages
Yeah.
of the chapter. Like, wow!
Yeah, the
Like,
cliffhanger.
Someone do it for me, please.
do what?
Set up the end. Talk about whatever we need to talk about.
Oh.
He's in trouble.
Bum, bum,
Cops
bum,
show
bum.
up,
Cops show up. It's not to shut down the party.
and they kind of walk in on them making out.
Awkward.
Well, they kind of like peek through the curtains, though, so it's like they at least try to show some decency, I guess. But
I don't know if that's normally considered decent, Michael.
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
Grushenka
lock
doesn't-
your curtains, people, if you want to be in private.
Okay,
Grushenka,
so I guess for me,
Grushenka doesn't mind.
Grushenka's used to it.
Jenny,
Not that she doesn't mind. She's used to it.
all right, please, come on, stop.
So, as someone who's never read this before and doesn't know where the plot is going, I mean, for sure, all the foreshadowing was that Fyodor was going to die. But then what we saw earlier in this book was possibly that Grigory was dead. And so then when the cops show up, they say, nope, it's Fyodor. So I guess it's the big cliffhanger. You know, what happened?
The
Did he almost
yeah.
kill Grigory? Did he also kill Fyodor? What's going on? Did somebody else? What happened? And I don't have an answer, but that sets up the last 2 pages for somebody.
And Dmitri does cry, the old man in his blood, and that's like the last clear thing he seems to say.
Dmitri is just such like over the top all the time. Like when they show up, he's like, gentlemen, how are you? I understand. Like he does it like twice. He's always shouting, and yeah, this doesn't look good.
That's why Grushenka loves him. Just loves
yes,
that over the topness.
By the way,
Cliffhanger.
get ready because it is hard to keep track of these official characters like commissioner, deputy, prosecutor, and all that stuff. If you thought characters were hard, these are the hardest ones to keep track of, I think.
Oof.
So
Just what I need. More Russian names I don't know.
well, thanks everyone for another good discussion. We will read book 9 next week. The preliminary investigation. So we'll see you all then.
Fabulous.